And we'll get underway. So today's final keynote will be presented by Paula Bray. The title of the keynote is "The Lab Culture, Does the Petri Dish Approach Work?" Paula is the DX Lab leader at the State Library of New South Wales and is responsible for developing and promoting an innovation lab utilising emerging web technologies to deliver new ways to explore the library's vast collections and its data. Paula is shaping the lab up to be an incubator for creative ideas and a partner for innovation. Paula has extensive experience in the creative concept, strategy, production and delivery of innovative digital products. She has strong skills in building communities online and making creative digital experiences for the web, exhibitions and with collections. She has a passion for audience engagement, emerging technologies, cultural collections, linked open data, storytelling and innovative digital projects that are all changing the way that content is accessed and shared. Would you please join me in welcoming Paula to the stage?
Good afternoon. Thank you, ALIA, for having me today. It's a pleasure for me to come and speak to you all. Hat tip to Vicky McDonald for making this happen. Thank you very much. I'm going to talk a little bit about this project later, but the title of my presentation today is "The Lab Culture, Does the Petri Dish Approach Work?" So I'm from the State Library of New South Wales, and I am running a lab called the DX Lab. This is how we roll on Twitter. If you want to tweet today, that'd be awesome. So the DX stands for Digital Experience, and we sit within the Digital Experience division, but we really are a library-wide team. So there's many people, many staff across the organisation that really work on DX Lab projects. So we are Australia's first cultural heritage innovation lab that supports new ways of design thinking, experimentation and research in digital humanities. And we're in a really lucky position to be able to kind of give support back to the sector in being the first. I feel like it's something that we really need to do. But there's also a lot of pressure that comes with being the first innovation lab within cultural heritage. So I'm going to talk a bit about some of the risks and some of those pressures, and also really get under the hood to make this useful for you today. So we are just over a year old, but if you look at it, 622 days, sometimes it feels like 622 days, but other times it feels like 14 seconds. And this is kind of a byline that our UX and design person came up with when she was designing our website, and it was made with, played with, remade. And we've been using that quite a bit in the lab, but play, yes, but it's more complicated than playing, and I'm going to unpack some of that with you today. So there's other labs that exist in cultural heritage in the world, and we couldn't actually go into the DX Lab without actually acknowledging who they are. So our inspiration has come from various labs in the world, New York Public Library labs, and if some of you were at Jenna Bain's talk today, hearing about Amplify, which the code came out of New York Public Library Lab. So for the web team and the DX Lab, they have been a real inspiration to us in the great work that's come out of there. The British Library Labs, obviously, they're doing some fantastic work, particularly with their competition that they run. So really supporting digital humanities and that other people can make great stuff with their content. not necessarily considered a lab, but the work that Tim Sherratt has done at Trove and what Trove have continued to do has been such an inspiration for the lab, and we really try to pull from their API into a lot of our digital experiences that we make within the DX lab. It's absolutely fabulous content and a rich resource. Our friends over in New Zealand, Digital NZ, have been doing some fantastic work for quite some time. Again, not necessarily calling themselves a lab, but doing really interesting work in a similar way. Some of you may have heard of New Inc., which is an incubator that's run in the building next to the New Museum in New York, and they're turning 3, and there's been some incredible artists go through this program, and some really fantastic outcomes for those artists and for the New Museum. So they're a really great inspiration for us. Europeana, they kicked off a lab as well. You heard Seb talking yesterday about the work that he's done, and he's really inspired that sort of lab style way of working. And he and Aaron have really been very good at documenting what they do and what they make and publishing it. And he's taken that model over into ACME as well. So, you know, there's lots of things going on in lab space that we can turn to. Again, in New Zealand, there's an accelerator program that's being run out of Te Papa. It's called Mahuki. They're doing a really interesting program there around innovation, more in a commercial sense, but again, a fantastic network of support that's coming out of a cultural heritage institution. So why is the sector doing this? We all have different reasons within our institution, but we can all learn from each other. And I guess that's what, you know, we're all digitising our content, and some of us at different scales, but it's almost like we're getting to that point where we're not necessarily just talking about digitisation. It's about what do we do? What do we do next? What's the then what in this program? And that comes with different challenges. So I suppose you heard Seb talking a lot about the museum yesterday. I'm really focusing on the library, but it's the principles behind what we do that are really quite similar. So why does the library need a lab? You know, I think of libraries as, you know, the living lounge rooms of the city. They're really good for the soul. They're places of deep research and access. And we're in positions now where we can change some of those perhaps perceptions that people have of libraries and really bring them into the 21st century through engaging with digital. We can't ignore what's happening around us. Okay, so these are our future clients, our future audiences. I love this photo. I think it's about 6 weeks old. It's like, is that possible? So these audiences are, you know, native digital people. They're used to Google, they're used to Amazon, they're used to retail, and we have to keep up with the way that they expect to get stuff, and quickly and easily and simply. So, you know, we really should be looking at the way retail and these other services beyond us in the library work. One of the things that came out of a report in 2014 was that a lot of the GLAM sector is putting innovation as an add-on. And I know that it's really difficult for business as usual teams to have time to experiment on top of their workloads. It's really difficult. But how do we find a way of making that innovation, experimentation, agile work methodology core? So I guess that's one of the things I'm really passionate about with the DX Lab, is that we don't want to be like, you know, the weird kids up on level 3 that just play and don't really engage and put stuff back into the business. That just wouldn't work. And we need to make sure that the things that we produce are focused on our services, our clients, our exposing our data in new ways that is meaningful to audiences, but also internally within our staff as well. So really, the lab is a place for experimentation, research, and collaboration. And innovation doesn't happen unless there is a really good sense of collaboration, whether that's internally, but also externally. And I guess we're trying to unlock new ways of exposing our rich data sets and our services in a way that potentially has not been done before with some of the latest technologies, but also existing technologies and simple technologies. So we're really fortunate that we, as you know, have a massive digitisation plan and project coming out of the State Library. And by the end of that program, we will have 20 million digitised items to work with. We currently have around approximately 7 million plus. And we need to find ways of exposing that data, not just through our catalogues. So where do you start? There are so many stories to tell. And I think one of the things around working with new technologies and existing technologies is being able to kind of push some of the boundaries in design thinking and UX, and kind of shift some of that predictive web project style that you have to go through in order to find and expose things in a way that you've never been able to see before. And again, bringing some of those findings back into the business. I think that's really important. The other thing is we can't possibly do all the innovation. You know, it has to come through other places, internally, but also externally. So we really want to try and encourage, you know, the digital humanities community, creative artists, and you know, curators, producers to actually know that we have this really great data and know that they can use it and create things with it. So part of it is just about, you know, giving a hint of what's possible. So how do we do this? What does it look like to be innovative? How do you have a culture that is agile, can work quickly? How do we learn from what we make in a really good and useful way? It can be hard. It can be really hard to change the way in which we work. But one of the first things that we did when the DX Lab was kicking off was we had a lot of post-it notes. We had a lot of brainstorming sessions. We were like, this is your lab. What do you want this lab to be? It's not going to work if we just run off and make this up ourselves. It's got to be what the staff in the library want from this lab, which was really, really useful for me to learn some really great values that had been, you know, coming through for a long time, and we could just articulate them and then work with those. So these are the library's values that they came up with. Boiled down, really. Collaboration, really important. We are a space for experimentation, and open to new ideas, open to data, you know, making sure that what we do is accessible. But the one that I really like at the end is surprise as well. It's, you know, it's this sense of, there was a sense of fun, but there was also this sense of surprise that we wanted to see things that we kind of dreamt of but couldn't quite make because the teams are so busy. I showed some of these design principles yesterday in our WEMALA session. We really try to stick to these when we are working in the lab, come back to the design principles. We're not really there to completely finish things. There is room for others to finish what we do. We also have room to publish, and publish very quickly, because what we need in the lab is feedback. We need to know that, this UX is terrible, this needs search, this is really useful for teachers. But if we don't publish quickly, then we can't sort of change and make them better. So we need that feedback loop. So constant prototyping. Prototype the prototype, push stuff out. So that brings us to skills. So when you're working with new technologies in the web and digital experiences, there's just so many new, languages to keep up with. People prefer certain languages. There's certain type of skills that it's just not possible for one person to have. So, we're sort of learning in our first year that the lab needs to kind of operate a little bit like a business within a GLAM. So what does that look like, and will we make that work? So we're going into our second year, and this is the current sort of, I guess, role titles that I'm working with. I will probably have to change some of those, but these are the kind of skills that I'm looking for, and not necessarily have an FTE model, which on one hand is really great because you can build up your team and you can build up the skill set within your team, which I think is really important when you're working in digital. But on the flip side of that is sometimes the skill set is beyond us, so we have to think differently about what that model is. So we're trying a little bit of a contractor model at the moment, which brings in different skill sets to the team. But that's what we're exactly working with now. So what does the creative process look like for us? This was a slide that one of my, I work with a creative agency quite a lot called Grumpy Sailor, and they built one of our big data visualization projects with us. And James introduced me to this slide to describe the DX lab. I wasn't sure about it at first, but it is kind of that moment of like, the curators take you down to the stacks and you just see all this stuff, and your mind just kind of explodes with possibilities of, we could do this, and then that's that left bit. That's down in the stacks. One of our fellows actually said to me, she came back up and the curators had taken her down and she looked white. And I was like, are you all right? Like, what happened? She goes, oh, it's like the internet down there. That summed it up. So for us, it's about, yes, there is this crazy kind of, we can make, and then it has to peel down into why. Let's focus. It might be a 2-week sprint, it might be a 1-week sprint in which we want to make something. So some decisions need to be made very, very quickly. And then stick to design, a little bit of shifting, pivoting, then publish. So this is a typical way of working for us now. And this is for a project that we've got coming up soon called Young Sydney, which is a transport mapping project. We try to get as many people from the organisation to be locked in a room for a day with lots of sticky notes. And it is a huge brainstorming session. It is very focused. There is barely any time to check emails or do anything. And it's really heavy and intense and takes a lot of time. And I realise it takes a lot of time for the staff as well, but it's well worth it in the outcome versus 21-hour-long meetings. which can be important too, I know. And this is just a shot of what came out of that session for this 2-week sprint that we have made. We really looked at the business context, the purpose, the goals, the platform, the risks, the critical behaviours, open issues, doneness. Sorry, that's not a word. All possibilities looked at and then drilled down. Like, what is this sprint trying to do? So it's not just playing. And then all those ideas, whether we can do them or not, are captured. Some are put to the right. Yes, that's amazing. One day we might do that. But for this project, it is not possible. And this is just a quick sneak peek at Young Sydney, which is a transport mapping experiment. It'll come out soon, and that's what that brainstorming session was for, based on one of our maps in our collection of a proposed railway line in Sydney that was never built in 1877 compared to the current City Circle line that we have today. That's just one part of it. So, the concept of experiments. I try not to call what we do products, because the more we use that word experiment, the more I think people really understand what it is we do. So now I'm going to talk you through some of our experiments. So our site, we have our DX Lab website, and everything that we make, every experiment has a story published. And that story is about the making of that work, and it is about unpacking everything we can. The tools we use, the problems we came across. So it's this really honest learning that we're trying to put out there. List the tools, the open source tools we've used, so that anyone in this room can go and do the same thing with open source tools. So that's our mission on the site. So our first really big data visualization project is this one, Loom. And it's really taught us a lot in the lab. You'll notice down the bottom it said experiment. So it's really, we've really found that it's important for us to tell our audiences it's an experiment, it's okay. There will be things that you may not like about it, but there might be things you love about it, and that's okay. We're experimenting. So now I just want to get under the hood with this project to show you how we built it and what we've learnt along the way. Always coming back to our design principles. So this initially was a 6-week sprint we did with our creative agency, because I was trying to build up the team, the internal development team, and we were launching the lab, and we needed to demonstrate what our values and ideas were very, very quickly. This 6-week sprint has turned into a year-long partnership, which we didn't see coming. But it's been a really good one, and really, really fruitful in our learnings. So one of the things with Loom was we wanted to challenge the notion of the catalogue and actually remove the search box. That's pretty kind of crazy, because search is so important, and in systems you really need search. So what if we removed search, but we could access our collection in a really completely different way using WebGL? We didn't necessarily want users to have a one-to-one relationship that you get in a catalogue. We wanted it to be a serendipitous exploration of some parts of the collection. As you know, it can be hard to find things if you don't necessarily know what you're looking for. So search can be really tricky. So how do we showcase the library's Sydney-based content in a really new way? How do we highlight the data, make the connections without search in a beautiful way, but in a really meaningful way? It's almost like what we call the thing about the thing. Like there's something else that can come out of Loom, and we're trying to figure out what that thing will be as it moves potentially into business as usual. How can we, hopefully we can release the code, put the code up on GitHub, and others can make it even better. So we had to contain Loom because, again, remember the process thing? We were very much in that mess of possibilities and potentials. And so, working really closely with our research and discovery team to, well, what is the best way we can sort of demonstrate this? What is the data we should be using? So we drilled it down to Sydney. So we've got a lot of content around Circular Quay, Darling Harbour, and around Botanic Gardens. So that's what we focused on. We drilled it down. Let's demonstrate it with a smaller subset of content. So what are we looking at? We're only looking at 3,287 images, 1,300 tags, and there's the rest. So due to capacity also with data visualization, and the heaviness of being able to visualize things in WebGL, we thought this was a good test to just kind of limit it. So back to the white box, what now? I mean, this is the gateway into the collection and the archives. So if you remove that, that's quite a hard thing to do. But it was about getting information in new ways. So we drilled it down, got to the end of the line. This was about locally contextualized information showing me possibilities, inspiring possibility with this content. So building that first phase of Loom actually made us realise that, yes, there is one way of looking at data using WebGL, but there's also other ways of looking at this really rich data set. So we thought that potentially we should have 3 different, what we call lenses, into being able to experience this data. So we did another sprint and we took exactly the same data that you saw in the first view and just you can get it via location. So it's all location, date, place, and then micro-hooding that down. So this is, the digitised content is the peak, and the stuff that's left to be digitised is not the peak, the trough. But you start to sort of explore and have this bird's eye view of the collection that we have around Sydney and seeing it in different ways. We put in favouriting, but we also looked at the rich tagging that had been going on, the topics that were coming through with this data, so that you can explore, you can keep deep diving through having relationships with the data. And you can save it as you go. So, in the process of making that, which was quite exciting, we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we just did one more phase? One more lens, and then we'll finish it. We'll finish Loom. So we thought, well, we've got visual, we've got location, let's look at metadata. What would metadata look like in WebGL? So in the process of extracting all the sort of topics from the 3,000 items, this tool was built, the prototype of the prototype. And then I think it was you, Louise Danoon, who was working on this project. We showed this to her and she was like, you have to publish that. We're like, oh yeah, actually that's, it was such a simple way of actually getting to the topics by date and then pulling in Trove relationships underneath. So every single topic in that visualization has been mapped out and is in a working prototype, which then we published before we finished Loom So this is available as a different kind of research tool for people, which is a demonstration of that you don't necessarily know what you're going to find at the end of your project that is going to be really useful to people, but the agile experimentation process can do that. So then we said, well, how do we kind of show topics in WebGL? So this was again another prototype of particles in space. Crazy, but kind of useful because you start to again have this bird's eye view of the amount of data that we have in relation to place and time, and you can see relevancy in terms of the topics that are bigger, the more the topics per that data are the bigger. And then you can slice down and start to look at the collection in that totally different way. So what have we learnt from that? Having that lovely broader perspective of the collection, and when I say broader, I mean it's just the visual interface of stepping back and seeing lots of things as en masse and being able to weave your way through them. Process informs design and design informs process. We learnt that data can be very messy and doesn't necessarily do what you want it to do. But that it's great data. We have to work with what we have and find ways of utilising that. It's all about context, shifting into the relationships around context. So I think for Loom now, it's how can we make this valuable for teachers who apparently seem to really love this tool. So we've got to do a whole lot of post-publishing research and find out potentially should we move this into some kind of business as usual way? How do we do that? Do we acquire this code back into the collection? It's all about the collection. It's a bit of a loop, but it's something to think about. What would we collect? So this was running when I first started the talk. This is actually search that's happening across all our online catalogues. It's running out of Google Analytics, and although we don't necessarily want it to be in real time, it's down to a couple of hours. So we just kind of wanted to see what people were searching. What are they doing? Bringing that DNA of the what's happening in the library with search together to see and learn, but potentially also just to show this in a projection as you come into the library. This is what's happening. Search. This is what people are doing. So hopefully we will have that up in our library for you soon. One of the things that we're really passionate about within the lab is also our digital peers and supporting the cultural sector through fellowships and what we call a digital drop-in program. So these are opportunities for us to work with either people who don't get an opportunity to sit next to a developer and make stuff, or it could be a highly skilled developer who wants to come in and teach us some stuff. So I really think that this is, it's an easy thing to do. It's not costly, but it can actually have some really good sort of things come out of it. We do pay our digital drop-in people. We work very, very quickly. We only work on that thing for that week. And this is the first product experiment that came out of our first digital drop-in with Erica Taylor from Tweed Regional Museum. It's called Main Street. It's a very simple interface looking at the two collections side by side on top of each other. her collection at the top and our collection at the bottom. And the whole concept is around main streets over time. Each of the items links out to the respective catalogue systems, so you can easily get to the content to do deeper research. But this is just a little lens into a city regional comparison tool over time. And that took 2 weeks to make. What we didn't expect was that out of a 2-week sprint, we would be making a digital experience for an exhibition based on this code and based on this design, but with completely different content. So our exhibitions team came to us and said, could we turn Main Street into something for this exhibition we have coming up? We're like, sure, yeah, we can do that. So we built Portico, which has completely different content in it. So again, that iteration, it was very, very simple user interface, projection on a wall, and apart from staff time, it costs $2,000 for a projector. And you know, this came out of a sprint, a 2-week sprint. We didn't expect this to happen. We also got commissioned to do another work out of that externally. So the fellowship, supporting the sector. When I started to look at all the fellowships that the State Library offers, I was blown away by that program. And I started to look at dedicated digital fellowships within Australia. And our access and information team were on straight on to researching and were saying, no, I don't think there is a dedicated digital fellowship scholarship in Australia, Paula. So we're like, okay, well, you know, we're very fortunate to have an innovation lab. Why don't we have a digital fellowship? So, so the DX Lab fellowship was announced. It's $30,000, and it's been a really interesting project for us. So we have Alyssa Lee and Adam Hinshaw, who have created this marvellous interface that not only looks at search within our collection, but the item that is clicked on by the user across all our catalogues, and then they're bringing that together in one interface. So you're seeing the published material, the unpublished works. We're scraping book covers from an API to represent the books. We're using a colour-coded system for the Dewey Decimal System. We're giving the images a little bit more space because they're just so beautifully digitised and amazing content. This is a little bit sped up, but eventually we can get this down to real time of what is actually being the community's interface. This is, you know, this is like real time, what is happening in our library. And they're also looking at really kind of playful ways of showing that through hacking up microfiches and maybe having this in the library somewhere that shows the interface with analogue technology. So quite playful. I can't wait till this launches. And this is actually just a screen grab of 3 days worth of the community's search and item retrieval. Looks like a tapestry. So we then were fortunate enough to work with the Learning Services team who could put out a digital learning fellowship. So we did a sort of smaller version, working with a data set that existed, the Visionaries data set that looks like this. We went to competition to see who would win this fellowship, and it was Jeff Hinchcliffe from Canberra, who is a digital, he builds websites, he builds really interesting work. And this is just a quick hint of what he's taking the content and he's going to show it in a more retail style UI and user experience. So educational content, but with a real kind of shopping style interface. So it'll be really interesting to see what comes out of that. That's $10,000, that fellowship. This is the second digital drop-in we did, and we talked about this yesterday. WEMALA, which we're very passionate about. Again, solid brainstorming on a week sprint to build something with some data that the Indigenous Services team had been collecting, and really structured data with lats and longs. And Kirsten just sent this to me and said, is there anything we can do? So I immediately sent it off to a creative technologist, Chris McDowell, working out of New Zealand, who I knew would love to work with this data. And 1 week after that brainstorming session, we had WEMALA. It's not perfect. We know that. There's a whole bunch of UX that needs to happen across this, but it really demonstrates what can be done very, very quickly when people across the library who have different skill sets can come together and produce something. Again, this is not necessarily a complicated tech interface that we've built. This is one of our latest builds called Panoscope. It is came about from a conversation that I was having with my developer around the current trend with 360-degree video and photos that is being picked up by Facebook. Everyone's shooting 360. I said, well, the photographers were in 1890s, 1910 were shooting panoramas in at least 180. Couldn't we just pop one of those into something that looked like half a 360 Facebook experience? Surely. And he went, yeah, I'll do that. So he did that. And what happened just out of that conversation was, okay, so this open source tool that we can use, Panellum. So we hacked that up a bit, and it's not our sort of idea. It's just we applied it to existing technology. So now we have Panoscope, which has 52 panoramas from our collection in it. Again, it's an experiment, but it's a delightful way to experience the collection in a new way that a traditional viewer doesn't give you. And with the detail within the digitisation, it's remarkable. You can actually zoom in on things that you've never seen before, and we put a simple little, cut and paste this link to this detail so that you can share that on social media. So if you find things within the panorama, it's easy for you to share that on. Again, something fairly simple we built for our curator, Sarah Morley, who was working on the Planting Dreams exhibition. She had these wonderful then and now sort of flip-out books. And she said, surely there's an easy way for us to kind of, show the then and now, because she couldn't do it in the exhibition, in the showcase, because she had to open it up to a section of one page. So we just used some technology that media uses. We found an open source tool called Juxtapose, and we just put them in there, published them for her. It's not that complicated. Anyone can do it, really. The really great thing about that was that got picked up by a UK organisation called Capability in Brown, who wanted to share what we had done. So all of a sudden, the State Library's collection is being promoted by a UK organisation who pushed it out through all their channels. We gave them the code for the Repton sliders, and I think that's kind of a measure of success, is that they found that through search on the DXLab website and were able to use it. And they gave us really lovely credits and really lovely promotion on social media. So I might move a bit quickly now. Stack slip data is something that we have been working on, but it's sort of on pause at the moment due to the change in our systems. But our access and information team were in a brainstorming session saying, you know, sometimes it's really hard for clients to understand. It can take, you know, 30 minutes to go down into the stacks and retrieve a book, and you know, that can be tricky for our staff. So we thought, well, what if we could track the stack slip, you know, just anonymously. So we track the stack slip through its journey using NFC and just the Android devices that we have in the cupboard. And potentially a technician could just carry that with them and tap a few locations. We can track that in a database, and then we can show a visualization above the desk of where that book is and how far it is for them. So we'll probably pick that up with them, that team, soon. So again, it's like the business, we have to pause because of the business, but that's okay. We will pick that up. It's a really important project for us. So digital, it's really important that we meet the people who are working with us. So we're really trying to bring some new digital peers into some event style things within the DX Lab. So recently we ran a UX rapid prototyping workshop. We had students, we had creators, we had creative directors, we had a whole bunch of different people sign up for this 2-hour evening session with beer and pizza and a challenge. It was a very structured evening, but it was a lot of fun, and it was basically just brainstorming. What could we do? What if, you know? And really engaged, fantastic conversations, fantastic ideas coming out of students. But we used real DX Lab problems, experiments that they had to solve. So, you know, they're very passionate about the fact, don't just ignore the budgets, they were made up. So, stack slip data visualization. We haven't made it yet, but we are putting it out to our peers to say, what would you do? You know, what creative ideas could you come up with? And they came up with some really fantastic ones. You know, the library card of the future, the wearable, you know, tracking wristband, and this is one of my favourites, is if you could receive information on your phone or whatever device to say your book is currently passing Captain Cook's journal on the stacks. How cool would that be? It's so delightful. It's like, you know, I didn't ask for that, but, you know, here it is popping up on my tracking. And one of our earlier ones was with Code for Australia, fantastic, helping us to really kind of position the lab within the coding community. So we ran a session with them, meet the data owners, you know, meet the curators, learn more about the stories behind the collections, and show us what you've been doing. This is an interface that I really love, but it's treating the home page like an artwork. You would never do this if you're building something for, you know, a proper kind of web project. You kind of would never just say, what would the homepage look like if it was an artwork made of the collection? This is what came about when we put 1,001 postcards from the Broadhurst collection, hand-coloured, beautiful, into this homepage. They were all location-based, so we purely made this a visual viewer around place. So if you chose a place, then they come forward in WebGL like such. And then every single project that the DX Lab does links back to the catalogue in a new tab, so you can always get to the deeper record if you need to. But, you know, it's like, this is a bespoke viewer for that collection. But if you were looking just at this collection and you just wanted to look at the Blue Mountains, you know, maybe there's a room for bespoke collections viewers. Maybe that should be embedded in our catalogue, saying, we've noticed you've searched for Broadhurst collection item, here's the bespoke viewer that we've built. Colour. You'll probably saw yesterday Seb's, colour across the collection. It's a really great way for people to be starting to get into collections and to understand collections. And we're working on a project at the moment that is all about colour, which will be released later this year. But in that design process, what happened was we started to build this colour slider tool, and then one of our digital peers released his colour Tate collection, which I'll go back, it looks very similar. So what do? You pivot. I don't want to publish something that looks like something that one of our digital peers has pushed out. It was just pure timing. So we flipped that around and we're working on something else. So that notion of pivoting is really interesting, and that ability to be able to get feedback from your audience, get changes in your data, then seeing the way the data actually works or doesn't work, and not predicting exactly every time what you need to make. There's a room to pivot and change through design thinking. And I guess that's one of the takeaways we've really learnt within all of the things we've done, particularly this one. So in our weekly meetup with our curators, they were like, "Oh, you guys can replace all the images in Flickr with high resolution files, can't you?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure, we can do that. We've done that really all the time. The API should be fine." No, that was not simple. It wasn't the API necessarily. It was the way in which we had to match up items from Flickr in albums, which we hadn't anticipated. So what do? We need to find this image. We need to find it through a machine quite quickly. So we build an image resolver tool. So the image resolver tool actually finds, through image recognition technology, finds through likeness the image from the album that we need. We're not doing this manually. So this was a great tool of being able for us very quickly to find the image that we needed to replace in Flickr through the album resolver tool. Then I said to Luke, well, it's quite difficult for us at the moment with systems changes and all sorts of things going on internally until we get to that point that the high resolution images are there and easy for us to extract. I need 80 master TIFF files within 1 hour, and I need them, I really need them now. And I said, can't you just build something like the album resolver to extract those things for me? So he did. He built Dairy. And Dairy is now an internal tool that is a business as usual tool within the library for our staff to really quickly punch in an ID and get every single file type that they need. They tick a box and it zip drives it up to their desktop. Really unexpected. We did not anticipate this when we tried to think that it would take us a week to replace all the images in Flickr. So I think for us, this is a really good indication of the usefulness of experimentation. We've been able to build a tool that the staff is using every single day. Huge amounts of data are really, really quickly being downloaded. Lots and lots of megabytes to their drives. It gets deleted after they've downloaded, so we don't have this backlog happening. So for me, that is a real success that we've been able to experiment and find something that's really useful for the organisation. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up with a few things. It's not always complex tech. It's sometimes just an Excel spreadsheet, CSV file, stick it in GitHub. You know, there's lists and curated sets already. So we put them together, 50 libcats. That looks like that in our account for people to download and just use. So you don't have to be a developer. You don't have to be, you know, a high-tech person. We need to be able to be providing access to our data and our collections to everyone in different ways. So we made it through the first year. We had cake. We're on our way to the second year. So stay tuned, and we'll see what comes out of the DX Lab in the next couple of years, hopefully. So I just want to wrap up now with some takeaways, and I hope they're useful to you. So what we've learned is that experimenting is really important. Prototyping is critical in design thinking, especially when you're working with new and really new web technologies. I mentioned before that data can be messy and not always do what you predict it to do, but that's what we work with, and we find ways. We find ways to work with our data, and we use tools to make that data better. But the data that's been catalogued over, you know, many years is just so fantastic to be working with. And now that we're digitising at such a rapid rate, it's like being a kid in a candy store. Pivot, partnerships, think beyond normal collaboration. You know, partnerships can come from many different sources, and I think we're learning that it's really important for us to be innovative with others. It's not just the DX Lab vision. Tell your audience it's an experiment. Be very clear. Some people sometimes don't think it's an experiment, but you know, once we use that language and we publish more often, this is not finished. It does not work in this browser. It doesn't work on mobile because we are testing an idea. Then it kind of is okay. You tell people. If you don't tell people, they get frustrated. And fair enough. If you think you're going to a 3-year web project that's got search in it, then you will be disappointed. Sketch lots. Get the pen and paper out. We do a lot of sketching in the lab. We draw things up. It's like, this is in my mind. Sketching in code too. Build upon your code. Put your code out there. Use other people's code, which we have done through Amplify, and then make that code better. 2-week sprints necessarily aren't 2-week sprints, but that's okay if you want them to go on to be other things. Share your findings, share your code, share your data, and that's where I'm going to leave you. Thank you. Sorry, that was me.
Okay. Thanks very much, Paula. Is there any questions for Paula from the audience?
No questions. That's scary.
Well, if there isn't, I have one. So you use design thinking as a methodology within the lab. Do you have design thinkers on the team that are trained design thinkers, or is it a methodology that you've kind of rolled out across the team?
Well, everyone's a design thinker, really. You know, we're all users of interfaces, aren't we? So we all have an opinion on design thinking. Yes, we do have sometimes a specific UX and design person working with us, but I think that, you know, if everyone can sort of test and put in their sort of opinion on the UI, then yeah, we're all design thinkers.
That's great. So you don't need to have those specialists.
Oh, look, you know, there's great UX and designers do great work, let me tell you. But, you know, if that's not something you can, you know, afford, then, you know, use the specialists around you and come up with some concepts.
I guess it's really about the design mindsets too, isn't it?
Yeah, Looking outside of our sector, look at retail, look at the experience you have when you buy some shoes, you know, how seamless that can be. That's design thinking.
It is. Are there any questions from the room? Just one down the front here. There's a microphone on its way.
Hi. I was just wondering if you are doing any experiments with like virtual or augmented reality sort of?
Yeah, we are. We have recently taken a Samsung Gear into a tunnel, which sounds weird. But yeah, we're looking at some VR stuff at the moment. It's really challenging. Hopefully we'll do some prototyping within the next 6 months that we'll publish around that.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much, everyone. Just a reminder that the conference dinner is on this evening at 7 p.m. and we'll see you back here in the morning for the morning keynote. Please join with me in thanking Paula.